For all things outdoors, listen to the father of two, the Jesus-loving TV show hosting hairy, true-blood American redneck, Ben Cole.
And listen to the outdoor filming, chef cooking, chocolate milk drinking, John Weismuller. And we are
Rooted Podcast. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Rooted Podcast. So, obviously this episode is out a little later than we kind of want, but I've had some technical difficulties. I have update some computers, get my charger fixed. So sorry about the late pod, guys, but we are back. Turkey season here in the state of Tennessee has ended. A lot of surrounding states have ended as well, and I know some other states are ending very soon. So, now our mind is shifting more towards deer season. And obviously, we have a time between now and opening day, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So, Ben, let's talk about some of the things that we need to get ready between now and opening day.
I would say, starting off, one of the more important things you need to do is get the minerals to the ground. And, here's why. Minerals do a lot for your whitetail, not just your bucks growing antlers, but it also helps develop phenomenal milk production in your does, which is essential for your fawns to grow like they should. In fact, here's a pretty cool statistic. Calcium and phosphorus are the two most found minerals in deer antlers. And also, those two in particular help with blood clotting. They help with muscle construction. Or muscle contraction, excuse me. My bad. I messed up, guys. It helps with their metabolism. And, like I just said, it really helps milk production. So when you look at an antler, just talking about bucks here, right? When you look at an antler, you got to think it's a bone, right? So you're going to have calcium, obviously. That's what our bones are made up of a lot. It's calcium. And then you're going to have your protein also. So you have your minerals and your protein. So from my knowledge is an antler is 50% minerals, 50% protein. So you have to have a solid balance in your food source for them to reach their genetic potential. And we're not saying
Correct.
Every deer is going to be a Boone and Crockett. What we're saying is taking these steps in the off season will help generate the best environment for these deer. It's giving them everything they need, not only to survive, but what they're doing now is putting on fat deposits for the hard winter. They're getting ready for chasing does all over the place. The does are getting ready to drop fawns in a couple months. So milk production is going to be at an all-time high for those does for a while. And the better the milk, the quicker those fawns can get up and hightail it in the case of danger, which is what you want. You want them to develop perfectly. So I would say, number one, minerals. Number two, develop a solid plan for your food plots. You want to do something like soybeans, peas, something that is extremely high in protein. And, if you're going to plant corn for the later season, you need to go ahead and do that. You actually probably should have already done that back in April. You can still plant it now and get away with it if you're not going to harvest it. That's the difference. If you're doing it commercially, you have a set time that you can do that. So that way it's ready to harvest within that window that you need to harvest before it just gets absolutely too wet to do so. And there's a bunch of other factors that go into that. But, the thing of it is, if you're planting soybeans on anything smaller than 5 acres, don't expect them to last all winter.
Yeah.
Expect them
it's not going to happen.
No, it's not. Expect it to be a 2, 3 week, 4 week, month long food source, and then get ready to replant in, August, September, right before the winter, or There's another solution to this. You can plant clover. Clover is extremely high in protein, fat, everything the deer needs, fiber, all that stuff. It has everything they need to sustain, but it's also really good for turkeys. Turkeys absolutely love clover. So now you're not only targeting just your whitetail, you're also looking after those old longbeards and the hens too that now have poults. We are overrun with baby turkeys. They're everywhere, and it's the most amazing thing ever. I love baby turkeys. Love them. They make me excited.
Yeah, they're cool.
So, man, that's just a real quick look at what you can do, and we'll dive in more as we go. But, you know, as far as what I'm doing right now, that is what I'm doing. You know, if we could catch a break in this rain, you know, and I'm not saying anything negative about the rain because I know all too well that the good Lord can cut it off and then we're in a drought. So I am thankful for every single drop that we get. So I just need it to dry out, though, so I can get in there and plant some soybeans.
Yeah, exactly.
And get ready for this deer season.
Yeah, well, and you know the whole thing about clover too is it's a little easier on your wallet because you know it can last if you mow it, you know, and you take care of it. It can last 5 years or better in some cases, depending on your soil and yada yada yada. So, but you know, like myself, I always plant crimson clover, and I've taken care of it, and it stayed there. And then you only have to plant it the one time versus a soybean or corn. You have to plant it, buy it every single year. So that's kind of something else to think about too. But definitely getting your food sources, getting those minerals out. Do you see a difference? And this is just a random question in a block, like a mineral block versus a powder mineral. Do you ever see a difference, one in production of antler, or two just in the likelihood of the deer enjoying it?
Well, I'll say this: the powder itself is moved into the ground a lot quicker because it's not in block form. So it is taken up a whole lot faster than a block that has to slowly go into the soil. It takes a lot longer to get in there. So the deer having to actually physically lick the block instead of doing it like they like to do it, which is dig holes. I mean, those deer will absolutely destroy. And I'm not saying a block's bad or it doesn't work. I'm not saying that at all because it does. I'm just saying that, you know, to establish a mineral site, I would start with powder. And then once it's established, you know, it's fine to, I mean, you can do it either way, but once you establish it with powder, it's a lot easier to just go throw a block in there because number one, the deer already knows they're already coming all the time. And if you already have that hole and that base started, then it's okay if it just goes in periodically. In fact, it'll last a whole lot longer instead of having to go and put more bags out, you know. It's going to last you a whole lot longer. But I would say in the beginning, I would start with bagged mineral powder because it will go into the soil a whole lot faster and get that site ready to rip even quicker than anything else.
So let's talk about, you know, you're saying mineral site. Let's talk about how to prep one of those. So, you know, you don't just want to walk out there and just dump the bag on the ground. So ideally, if you could bring just a little rake, or even if you just kind of brush it back with your boot, you know, it's like, but if you can bring just a little rake in there and just rake back kind of all the stuff on top, the leaves and twigs and all that stuff, and kind of break the soil just a little bit, to me, that's the best way. Then it's just direct to the soil, and it's already starting the process of getting in there and creating or starting your mineral site. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. 100%. What I would do, a lot of times I make it to where, you know, I can keep adding as the site grows and the hole gets deeper, because it's going to get pretty deep. I can promise you that. So what you want to do is be prepared for that and think about that when you go and dump out minerals, because you don't want to dump out minerals in the middle of a food plot, because guess what? Then you're going to have to plow over a hole, and that is not fun.
Yeah.
So I highly suggest if you're going to put it in a food plot, put it on the edge where you're not going to disc around or have to disc through it but more so you can just go around it and keep going about your day. But what you said, man, spot on. Same applies for the woods. If you're doing, different mineral sites throughout your wooded tract, go in, figure out where those deer are by looking at sign. Find those intersections of deer trails. Boom, mineral site, camera, ready to rip, because you already know that they're going and coming through there all the time. If it's a well-worn path, they're going and coming all the time. So the best thing to do to establish the summer pattern and patterning these bucks for the early season, that is what you need to do, is figure out, okay, this spot right here is a hot spot for this time of the year. We're going to run the surveillance, figure out what's there. And then we're also going to have other cameras in other spots of the farm that we know notoriously from the past have been hot spots for the summer pattern, which, a lot of your summer pattern is also going to be in those food plots that are full of protein and everything else too. So, it's just knowing the different seasons and getting out there and just walking, man. Just walking your farm, figuring out, okay, I see rubs and scrapes right here. They're left over from last year. I've never been on this particular 20 acres or whatever, but now I've dialed it in to where I can drop a pin on my HuntWise app and go back there close to the rut and see if those scrapes and rubs are back. If they're back consecutively 2 years in a row, you got a pretty good chance that that's that dude's home. That's where he's hanging out.
Yeah.
So throw your camera up, surveillance, watch your wind, throw a wise eye up, and really watch those deer and figure out what they're doing, how they're coming in and out. That way you can place your stand in the best location based on the wind and the way they're going and coming in that particular field or the woods, whatever.
Well, and you were talking about kind of surveillance, and it's like, kind of getting your trail cams ready too is kind of a part of it. I mean, I know, our our cameras, the Wise Eyes, they have that hunt control app, and you can really dial it in, dude. You can get as nerdy as you want with it. All the moon phases, the wind direction, the wind speed, the barometric pressure, all these things go into effect, right? Just as you were saying, and it's like, man, if you can deploy enough of those, you can really, really, really start to get a feeling of where those deer are and coming from and things of that nature. And but another kind of little tidbit that a lot of people don't think of until it's too late is make sure you have a good battery source for your camera. Don't just grab it off the shelf, get it out of that bin, out of the garage, and sling it up there. Like, make sure it's got batteries. Like in our case, make sure it's got the solar panel, or you're clipped onto a battery to like a 12-volt battery, and then make sure your card has plenty of room on it, because there's a lot of times where if you have another camera, and your card's full, and then or it's not formatted correctly, things of that nature. I mean, those are little tiny things that could really make an impact on you. If you go out and put that camera out and then for a month it's not doing right, then you just lost a month worth of data that you could have potentially used to go get the deer that you wanted. So something to kind of think about that I know we've all done, but I know it seems small, but man, it can really impact your deer season if you let it.
Well, yeah, and then if you're like us that, hunt all over the country and you leave a camera on a farm and forget to do one of those steps and you're 13 hours away, it's like, well,
yeah, it's a bad deal.
There's that. Now we have to drive back over there or fly just to fix that one thing. And that becomes aggravating in a heartbeat. And I will say one thing that I really love about the Wise Eye cameras is the fact that you don't have to go in there and put your scent all the time.
Yeah.
That is really nice feature because, and the thing is, and the reason I say that is because they work in such diverse environments. They get cell service
Mm-hmm.
a lot better than whatever I've used in the past. So I have to say they perform very well, and it's a big feat when you can get cell service down at the ranch. And buddy, we got it. We're running right now, getting pictures all the time, and you don't have any cell service unless you're in the lodge on the Wi-Fi, and that is it. And buddy,
that's it, buddy.
We are rocking and rolling down there, so I'm very proud of that. But one thing too that you need to consider is your predominant wind. So when you're going to set up these tree stands and stuff for deer season, after you've done your surveillance, we're still talking preseason prep here. We're talking bow season, because a lot of times when you're gun hunting, you got a shooting house or a tree stand you put up 5 years ago or whatever. But this applies to gun hunting too. But, what I like to do is I like to go in, write down the predominant wind for my area every year. Like during the wintertime, what is the probability it's going to be a north wind? Because if it's a north wind and you're setting up for a south wind, well, guess what? You're in a bad spot every single time because they're going to blow you and get out of there. So that's just one thing that I like to do is collecting that kind of data. And once again, the old hunt control does that for you. But I'm just saying, knowing the wind, knowing the predominant wind is one of the best ways to set up to hunt your farm. And the thing is if you have big enough fields, you can actually drop more than one stand for archery to hunt different winds. You can hunt a north wind and a south wind, just on different sides of the field, whichever way that field's laid out, So that's one thing to keep in mind. The next thing is, I know we talked about clover, and I wanted to touch on this a little bit because you were talking about how it's easy to kind of get easier on the wallet and all that stuff. Another reason why it's easier on the wallet is because it's a legume. So legumes fix nitrogen back in the soil, whereas corn strips it, takes everything. Corn, sorghum, all that stuff, it takes everything out, puts nothing back. Soybeans, clover, all that stuff, it's called a legume, and it fixes nitrogen on its roots, which then deposits it back in the soil, thus reducing your fertilizer costs throughout the year to grow other crops. That's why it is so important to rotate soybeans and corn every year. And the thing is you can grow soybeans back to back to back to back, and it don't hurt anything because it doesn't take everything to grow them. It doesn't strip the nutrients out of the soil. So my advice would be is if you grow corn, switch it with soybeans, because if you don't, eventually you're going to have a phenomenally large fertilizer bill. And you want to do right by the soil too. You want to be able, that's part of conservation, right? We're not just trying to grow stuff for the deer. We're also watching out for the soil, the environment. That's, the whole habitat as a whole. That's what we're trying to do there.
Right.
So that's my little tidbit on that. I just had to throw that in because you touched on that, and I thought, man, I need to say that. So, yeah, man, that is the reason why you do a crop rotation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally agree. And, it's like I really love planting dakin radish. And, for those of you that don't know, it's in the brassica family. And so essentially what it does is it grows this big tube, in the ground, and then and then eventually they come up and it has this leafy green, and the deer like to eat the leafy green, and then come late season they eat this tube. And also what that tube does, it actually puts organic matter back into the soil, and it really helps that soil get really enriched, and it just helps the soil overall. So, whenever you're looking at planting things, yes, obviously the deer have to want to eat them, but also what does it do for you in the future? So kind of something to think about whenever you're making your food plot. So kind of another thing I wanted to touch on, it's we started talking about tree stands there for a second. Obviously, you use your trail cameras to help you pick out where your stand needs to go, and then you need to pick out your wind. One other thing I'll kind of say here is, obviously you're putting up these tree stands in the summer. It's June, July, right? But you need to think about and try to have that vision of what is this going to look like in November or December when all these leaves are gone. What is this going to look like? So kind of something to think about that maybe a lot of people don't. And I know I've done it, man. You're just in there. You're like, oh, this spot's perfect. Great. The deer are here. And you're not really taking that second or third step to just think, step back, zoom out a little bit and look and see what's really going on. How is this going to look come a cold, crisp November morning? Because that's when it matters. It doesn't matter what it looks like in July. It matters in what it looks like when it's game time. What is this spot going to look like? What's it going to do? So, just something else to kind of keep in the back of your mind there.
Well, yeah, because, with all the foliage on the trees, you're like, oh, man, that's a great cover. And then you get to November, and you're the only tree in the field that has no cover. I've done it before, man. It's just like, what? Are you serious?
You're like, how am I the only one on this ridge that's sticking out like a sore thumb? It happens, man.
Yeah, I mean,
it just happens.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So, when you're looking for the best spot for a tree stand, whether it's a ladder stand, lock on saddle, whatever it may be, I like to find a spot where you can vision and physically see. Okay, there's a lot of backdrop here. There's a lot of limbs. Forget the leaves.
Yeah,
forget them.
Yeah, exactly. Look at limbs.
Look at the limbs. If there is a good backdrop behind you that will break up your silhouette, you're good. If there's a lot of open sky, not good. They're going to pick you out like a sore thumb.
Not good at all.
And so what you want to do is basically position yourself to where you have the most concealment. And that's just a rule of hunting anyway. And a lot of y'all know that already, but it's just something to think about and keep in your mind as you're going into this stage of, let's get ready for deer season. And I'm glad you brought that up because I have done that so many times. And then I get to my stand in the afternoon, I'm like, oh, shit. That was a horrible idea.
You're like, it's terrible. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm going to sit here. I'm already here now. So, might as well get on in.
I'm here.
As far as ground blinds go, too, you need to think about that kind of stuff, too, because all of that foliage,
brushing it in.
Growth is not going to be there in November. It's dead. It's usually gone. So you need to take the time, go cut some grass or whatever's right there around you, and really take the effort to brush it in and make it look just like a brush pile. And then they're not like, oh, what's that black hole over there? I just saw a face in it. What are they doing? It's like, see y'all later. You got to think about all those situations. Yeah. And that applies to camo too, man. When you're looking at your camo pattern to sit in a ground blind, well, obviously, you're not going to be like, oh, let me wear this sky-colored camo in a dark background. Makes no sense. Just wear a black hoodie. It's simple. Just something that it's all about blending in with your surroundings. So,
yes,
if you're wearing a dark colored shirt, a dark colored jacket, hoodie, whatever, your movements are less likely to be detected because they're not standing out.
Yes, so, I always try to wear almost like dark timber if I'm in a ground blind. Yeah. And now my woods have always just seemed to be darker. I love wearing that dark timber stuff. I've got some of it from Sitka that I actually went turkey hunting in, and it's their deer pattern or whatever, and it's like, dude, it just works for my woods. It always has, and I just love it. But so another kind of thing here to touch on is whether it's blinds or stands or ground blind, box blind, whatever, tower stands, it doesn't matter. And I've seen people do this. Don't wait till the middle of September to throw up your ground blind. Whenever I say prep work, I mean dude, you really needed to be doing it now. June, July, the sooner the better. Because if you have it whether it's on a trail, whether it's on top of a ridge, it's on a saddle, it's on a point, a finger, it's in a food plot, whatever the scenario, the more often that deer walks by, because listen, guys, the deer knows that ladder stand's there. Okay. Now, if you have a lock on or a saddle, you can kind of hide it a little better, but like it sees the sticks, like it's not dumb, right? It sees the blind. But if it associates like, oh, I see this new brush thing. Okay, cool. Whatever. Nothing's happening. I'm still eating this awesome food, or I'm still walking down my normal trail and I'm eating my acorns, whatever it is, right? Like nothing is changing. Then versus now listen, that stuff's gonna take time, right? So, it's gonna come in there on a random Wednesday in July and kind of be like looking at it, and obviously you're not gonna be in there, and it's gonna just be like, oh, I don't know, and then over time, right? June happens, July happens, August happens, most of September, and by this point, it's like whatever, and now you're good to go. You're golden. You can slip in there, which actually kind of brings me to my next point here, which is you can have the best spot in the world, and you could put that tree stand there in June and get it all covered and have a nice, canvas of camo, whatever on it, and you can have all the trail cam pictures in the world and the mineral sites created. You did everything right, and you got the worst way possible to walk in there, and now it don't matter.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that.
So I would say one of the most overlooked things, how am I going to get in and how am I going to get out? You really, really need to look at that, because I've known people that are like, well, I just walk down this same ridge, the deer walk, or heck, it's 4:00 in the morning. Let's just stomp through the bedding area. But what are you doing? You're just ruining your hunt before it starts. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I will quit going on and on, but that's kind of what I think. What are your thoughts about all that rant I just went on?
Well, I agree 100%. Putting the tree stands up now is a very good option because, like you said, you're letting the deer acclimate to that being there, that new structure being there. One thing I will add, though, on the shooting houses, if you have plexiglass windows, you can actually get this stuff. It's like a window tint and black it out. You can still see out, but they can't see in. So it really helps you not be silhouetted when they come out and they're looking right at you, but they can see through the blind. They can see all the way through, see the windows behind you. Just go ahead and get you some of that stuff and black out the windows. It makes it so much better. It's so much easier for you to hide and not spook the game. And there's a lot of different benefits that has. And I've noticed that, I got creative one year and took some old bed sheets that I'd bought from Wally World. So I was like, man, these deer keep seeing me when I'm trying to just sit here and scout and film them. And I thought, well, shoot, what am I going to do? And I thought, bed sheets. So I ran to Wally World real quick and I got me some, and they were thin. I could just about tear them. I hung them up over the windows there, and game changer. Yeah. Total game changer. I was like, this is a great idea, but we need to figure out a better way to do it than bed sheets. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But you can tint those windows pretty easily. I think it even comes in a spray can that you can just, like an old rattle can that you can just hit them windows with, and it'll dark it out just enough to, break everything up for you. And that way they can't look right through the blind and be like, oh, there's an arm moving right there. What was that?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of the same concept as the ground
yeah.
blind, It really is.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I will say too, though, your point about the way you enter and exit the woods, that is directly related to your success. If you go in there, like absolutely. For example, velvet season, August here in Tennessee, you go boot stomping through there, and the morning time, well, you're really, really, really decreasing your odds of killing a deer because they have been feeding all night long, and they are going from food back to the bed, and you are going to pass them when you walk in because it's still dark. It should be. and you're going to blow them out of there every single time. Now, if you go in there around 1:30, 2 o'clock, you're like, man, that's a long sit. Yes, but it makes up for the morning that you did not get to sit, and you're already in there. You're in there, you're settled, you're not trying to hustle in and rustle around, you're ready. And that's when you start killing deer in the velvet season. And another note, stop driving side-by-sides to the blind. Walk. If you're able, walk. They can hear that. Those deer can hear for a long way. They can smell, and yeah, they get used to it and all that stuff. But at the same time, I'm talking in generalities here. If you want to really maximize your experience, and this all goes down to ability too. I mean, if you can't walk to your stand, I get it. Drive all the way to it. Sit in your side by side. It works too. But I'm talking about for these big old wise 6-year-old bucks.
Yeah, old mature deer. Yeah.
That are like, man, I'm good. I've done been shot at twice. He already knows what's up.
Exactly.
He hears that crank up at the barn, and he's gone to the next county for the next 2 weeks. He's like, nope, not today. So, that's one thing that, I would, I used to be that guy. I mean, I'd drive up and, 100 yards, and I was like, well, why ain't I seen anything? It's because I was driving and busting the deer out. I should have walked from the house to the stand. And sometimes that's not doable, man. Like some of our spots on the mountain, there's no way you're going to walk from the house all the way into that spot. It's just too much terrain to handle.
But in the same breath, you also have a plan, right? Like, okay, I'm going to drive my side by side along this edge up here, and I'm going to park it here, and then I'm going to walk the quarter mile wherever. There still needs to be a thought process through it all. And if I am going to drive the side by side, I need to leave at this time because I'm going to drive through listen, at Sinking Creek Ranch, you're going to drive through some areas where deer already may be. So you may need to leave a little early. That way you don't bust those deer out. And then they just, the domino effect happens. So, but the bottom line to it for me is like, you still need to think it out, plan it out, whether it is side by side, whether it's walking, whatever the case is, plan it out.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting to. If you are going to drive a side by side, know, okay, this is the route I'm going to take. This is the way I'm going to enter that stand because the wind is this, or whatever. Like you said, have a plan and stick to it.
Yeah. And, again, with the past, it's like, listen, if you can really figure out where you're going to walk in and out, I'm not saying go in there and doze a trail, but make you a little trail. Maybe with a rake. If you just bring a rake and a pair of loppers and you just make yourself a little trail, that way you can get in quiet too. Because, even if you have a great path, which is awesome, and you can get away with a little more, but it's like if you're just in there making a bunch of racket and twigs are snapping and leaves are rustling and you're just making a fool of yourself, which now this also boils down to woodsmanship, learning how to walk in the woods. That just comes with time. I'm talking about deer prep. I'm talking about prepping in the summer. Do whatever you can do now to help future you, do it. That's what I always say. Help future you. So if that's making yourself a little path, a little trail, whatever you want to call it, then do that. Whatever can help you be more successful, and help future you, do that.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 110% on that. And, you just got to remember that managing a farm and doing all this prep is not a 1-year turnaround. You're looking at your 5-year, 10-year plan here. You're looking at, like John just said, the future you. You got to think, well, what is this going to do to my farm in the next 5 years? How is this going to impact it positively, negatively, and both? You have to look at all those situations before you just go out there and, do whatever willy-nilly. I mean, you really need a plan for every aspect of all of this.
Exactly. Yep, I totally agree. So we've talked about the food, we've talked about minerals, stands, access, entry, exit. I kind of want to talk about some other prep. What is some out of the field deer season prep that one can do? Something like get your bow out, shoot it, sight it in, sight in your gun, right? It's kind of things like that, because I know me and you have done it, and we've known a lot of people that do it. Here it is, August, or the beginning of September, just a couple weeks out before season, and they just start shooting their bow. It's like, dude, for a gun, you can kind of almost get away with that, especially if you've been shooting it for a while. But just kind of make sure it's on. But even then, you still need to know your weapon. You need to know how the trigger feels, how it pulls, how it cycles, how it shoots. You need to know and feel it. But a bow, it's just amplified. It's whatever the gun is times 100. There's just so much more going into it. There's anchor points, how you hold it, how tight are you holding it? Is your wrist in? Is your wrist out? What's your anchor like? Are you pushing the string? Are you moving the knock just a little? Because for a bow, if it's off by a centimeter here, when you get out to 40 yards, it's off by feet at that point. And then you factor in wind and the deer moving, and there's just so much going on. So you need to practice really all the time, but you need to start practicing right now. That way you're ready come opening day.
Well, the thing of it is too is you're getting comfortable with your weapon. You're getting used
Correct.
to the way it shoots. You're getting used to that trigger pull, bow or gun. You can have the world's most sighted in gun and the best bow that's on the market with the best sights. But when that deer walks out and those adrenaline nerves start flowing,
start shaking.
The old shake and quake there. When you go to draw back, it's like, so there's a lot of things that factor in. So if you're spending all this time over the summer repetitively training your muscles to do this, shooting all the time, going to the rifle range, shooting that gun, making sure that when it comes down to crunch time, you can at some point shut those nerves down just long enough to release that trigger or pull that trigger. Because with a rifle, you're not slapping it like a shotgun. You just ease into it. You want that recoil to
squeeze.
Surprise. Here comes a kick. That's what you want. You don't want to be like anticipating the kick and jerk. You don't want to do none of that. That's the same with a bow, man. I mean, dude, like you said, a centimeter here is feet out there. So I always have a rule of thumb. If you plan on shooting 60, you better practice to 70. So that way, when that deer is at 60, you're like, oh, cakewalk. I already know what to do. I'm ready to go. There's no questions about it. I am ready to rip 110% at 60 yards. But for me, I like, my whole point of bow hunting is getting them in close. Because that, if I want to shoot them at 70, 80, 90 yards, well, by golly, I'm bringing out the rifle. My point, and I'm not saying, that folks that shoot that far is wrong. I think, hey, if you're good at it, rock it, man. But for me, I'm not good at that. And I am good at pulling that trigger on that rifle, though. I can promise you that. That's what I call the equalizer. It equalizes my inability to shoot that far with a bow. It's like, yes, now I'm in the ball game. I'm playing on that court, dribbling wide open. So, I agree with you, though. You need to be out practicing, and you need to be practicing with the arrows or the ammunition that you will be hunting with. Correct grain, all the way through.
Exactly.
And make sure that not only are you shooting on, but here's another thing you need to do, too. After so many shots, you need to take your bow in, have it paper tuned, and have everything gone over, the strings, everything, to make sure that it is all kosher before you go to the woods.
Yep. I totally agree. You need to make sure your strings are good and, your release is acting properly and just everything's in tip-top shape because, whenever the moment happens, you don't need anything to not operate, right? whenever that deer steps in front of you, you know, and it's whatever 20 yards, in that moment, you need to know that this piece of equipment is going to operate to full capacity. Because if you have one little doubt, you're like, this string's a little frayed, or this is just a little weird, or you know, something's going on. It's like, yeah, don't shoot it, but then that's in your mind, and now you're not thinking about picking a tuft of hair on this deer. You're pulling, going, oh man, please don't break. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't practice. Like, man, having full confidence in your equipment and full confidence in your shot makes making the shot so much easier. And that sounds kind of like duh, but you know, man, a lot of people kind of don't ever think about that. It's like this practice, it's obviously going to sight the bow in and everything, but it's going to give you confidence. That way, whenever the deer steps out, you can just pick a tuft of hair, aim small, miss small, breathe, operate, shoot, and make the shot that you need to make. That way you make a clean, ethical shot. So, you know, the prep now is going to help you later on. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So that's the whole moral of this episode is your prep work now will result in success later. You know, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're doing the work now. So we can enjoy the spoils of our labor.
Yeah. There's a little saying, you know, proper prior planning prevents poor performance. If you can remember that, you will be successful.
And also remember, it's God's world. We just living in it, and we need to take care of the critters He gave us to take care of.
That's it, pal. So, you know, the bottom line to this whole episode is just trying to kind of portray, make sure you're doing the right things between now and opening day. That way you can have a successful season. So start with the minerals. Get your cameras out. Get your food plots in the ground. Start getting patterns. Start thinking about where you want stands and blinds and things and entry and exit, and start thinking about this stuff. That way, come opening day, you are ready to rock and roll, and you can put the deer on the ground.
Yeah, and you know, like my old basketball coach used to tell me, practice, 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 practice. It makes perfect. That's
sure enough.
With your rifle, your bow, whatever, man, just keep going. If you have a bad day of shooting, guess what? It happens. Just keep on going. But, man, I don't have anything else. Is there anything you'd like to dive into further?
No, not really. I mean, you know, there's obviously, we kind of left a lot of meat on the table, which is also just fine. So it kind of gives us some more things to really dive into. You know, we could do a whole hour just on tree stand placement. We kind of just touched the surface, you know, just kind of an example. But, you know, I just want to say thanks for listening. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, all those fun things. We're on all the socials, anywhere you can listen to a podcast we're on. So thank you for listening, however you are listening. And guys, we do have a merch store. If you go on rootedtelevision.com and hit store, it'll take you to all of our awesome stuff. We have all sorts of goodies in there. Also, if you want to support this podcast, in the description of this podcast will be a link that'll take you through everything you need to do to donate to this podcast so we can keep doing this show and keep giving out tips and tricks and telling our crazy stories. So just remember, guys, proper prior planning prevents poor performance.
And with that, the redneck is out.
See y'all.
For all things Rooted Podcast and Rooted Television, and I mean hats, shirts, hoodies, and other merch, check out our friends at CH Lone Star Pro and the link that is in our description.